Some nights don't begin with a fight. They begin with a kid in a school uniform shaking in a hallway, pointing at a note taped to her bedroom door. "We culled your dog away. Don't make a scene." That kind of message isn't just cruel. It's control. It's telling a child her heartbreak is an inconvenience. Tonight we're not here to cheer for revenge or label anyone. We're here to step into one moment that splits a family in two and notice what it exposes, what people will do to keep power, and what a parent will do when their child gets hurt on purpose. So come with me. An 11-year-old is crying. Her dog is gone. And her father doesn't cry because he knows tears won't fix this. He does one thing instead. And the next morning when there's a knock at the front door, the screaming starts. My name is Rylan Voss, I'm 30, and I'm going to tell you how a family rule turned into a line I refuse to let them cross again. But before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Comment, hi, or listening, or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. And if you've ever been the one who had to protect your child from the people who share your last name, please subscribe to this channel so you don't have to feel alone in it. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. When I stepped through the door that night, the cold hadn't left my jacket, and the metallic scent of warehouse dust still clung to my hands. It had been a 12-hour shift, and all I wanted was to shower, maybe microwave something terrible, and fall asleep with a show I'd forget by morning playing in the background. Instead, I found my daughter standing frozen in the hallway. Mila, 11 years old. Still in her school uniform, her face blotchy and eyes swollen like she hadn't stopped crying for hours. She didn't say anything at first, just looked up at me with that small, cracked voice and said, "Dad, you need to see this." She turned and led me to her bedroom like she was walking me into a crime scene. And taped to her door, plain printer paper, thick black marker, every letter like it was meant to cut, was the message that changed everything. "We culled your dog away. Your cousin didn't want it around. Don't make a scene." I didn't register it at first. My brain rejected it like a misprint. But when I read it again slower this time, the cold that had lingered on my jacket crept inward past my ribs. My chest locked up. I pushed open her door. The dog bed was gone. Pippin's food bowl gone. His leash gone. Toys blanket the chew bone he'd carried room to room like a toddler with a stuffed animal gone. Not packed up. Erased. I stood in that space where something had once breathed, once mattered, and suddenly didn't anymore. My eyes scanned the room, but my mind was backtracking, trying to figure out how we got here. Pippin wasn't just a dog, he was a spaniel mix with a limp and one cloudy eye. He walked like he didn't want to disturb the floor. He used to belong to my late sister, and when she passed, I took him in not because it was convenient, but because he was family. Mila grew up with him. When she had night terrors, he was there. When her mother walked out, he was there. During every storm, every argument downstairs, every quiet sob into her pillow, he was always there. Her one safe constant. Mila sat down on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I came home and it was gone," she whispered. "Grandma said not to cry. Said Brant didn't want him around. And if I made a scene, I'd be sent to my room without dinner." Her voice cracked, but she bit down on it. That note wasn't just an announcement. It was a threat. Don't react. Don't feel. I didn't tell her we'd get a new dog. I didn't tell her to be strong. I just sat beside her, pulled her close, and let her be a kid who'd lost something irreplaceable. But while she trembled in my arms, something inside me shifted. Not rage, not yet. Something colder. Sharper. If I lost it now, they'd call me dramatic. Dangerous. They'd use it against me. So I steadied myself not for peace, but for war. Later that night, I went downstairs. Everett was in the kitchen reading the paper like he hadn't just detonated a landmine in a child's heart. Lorraine sipped tea at the counter like she'd just taken out the trash. "Where's Pippin?" I asked. Everett didn't even look up. Handled. Brant didn't want him here. Lorraine added, "We didn't need the drama. You know how neighbors talk." I stepped closer, held up the note. You wrote this to her. You told her he was dead. She needed a lesson. She's too attached to things. You spoil her, Lorraine said, waving it off. Children need boundaries. Children, I repeated. Or just Brant Everett finally met my eyes. His voice was flat, final, my house, my rules. I stood there, jaw-clenched hands twitching to grab something. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. I turned, walked back upstairs, scooped Mila into my arms, and locked our door behind us. She asked what we were going to do. I didn't answer. Not with words, because I wasn't going to cry. I was going to make them wish they hadn't pushed me this far. By morning, the house was quiet in that unnatural way, like everything inside it was holding its breath. I called in sick to work. Mila stayed home too. There was no way in hell I was letting her spend another second alone under this roof without me. Everett left early, briefcase in hand, like nothing happened. Lorraine clanged dishes loudly in the kitchen, the passive-aggressive kind of noise meant to drown out the silence I wouldn't break. I pulled Mila into my room and shut the door. I'm going to find out the truth, I told her. All I need is for you to stay close to me, okay? She nodded. Her trust in that moment was so raw, so complete, it only made me more furious that the people in this house had crushed her without blinking. I started with the basics. Dug out Pippin's folder from the drawer, vaccination records, vet bills, obedience school certificates, and the paperwork from when I registered his microchip. I photographed every page, made backups. What they'd taken might have been emotional to Mila, but on paper he was mine. Next, we drove to the vet. It was a small clinic down near East Ogden Avenue where the receptionist still remembered Mila's name and kept a jar of dog treats by the front desk. I explained what happened, asked them to confirm that I was still listed as Pippin's legal owner, asked if they could flag his file in case anyone tried to bring him in for a name or chip update. The vet nodded, quietly appalled. As I signed the request, I caught Mila looking up at me with something I hadn't seen since yesterday, hope. She wasn't smiling, but she was steady. It was the first time she'd seen a grown-up fight for her with more than just words. But I wasn't done. That afternoon, I posted in our Naperville community Facebook group, then in the neighborhood subreddit, then in the St. Mark's Church bulletin board where Lorraine was known for passing out cookies and performing sainthood on Sundays. I included Pippin's photo, described his cloudy eye, his calm temperament, his age. Missing dog possibly taken without consent. Maybe passed off as a rehoming. Please contact if seen. But more than that, I posted a photo of Mila curled in bed, reading with Pippin beside her, his chin on her lap. No one could look at that and see just a dog. Then I went to the neighbor across the street. Everyone had a doorbell cam these days. I asked if I could review their footage from the afternoon before. After a few minutes of scanning timestamps there, it was grainy but clear enough. Lorraine hauling out a tote bag full of Pippin's things, Everett unlocking the trunk, a small tan blur in Lorraine's arms, a tail, a whimper, gone. I didn't say anything to Mila until I had the clip saved in 3 places. Then I sat her down. I'm collecting everything. They can't lie their way out of this. She blinked like the idea itself was foreign. That maybe this time adults didn't get to rewrite the truth. But the real shift came just after dinner. Someone from the church group sent me a screenshot in Messenger, a Craigslist-style listing. Older assistance-type dog, well-trained, calm, $2,500 rehoming fee. Contact Everett. I froze. My mouth went dry. Mila peeked over my shoulder. Dad, they didn't really kill him. No, I said. They just wanted you to think they did. They didn't expect me to look. The room was silent for a beat. Then I closed the laptop. They hadn't put Pippin down. They'd sold him, lied to their granddaughter, and wrote it down in black marker like it was gospel. Now it wasn't just grief. It was money, intent, fraud. And I had everything I needed to burn the whole damn lie down. I didn't storm downstairs. I didn't slam doors or demand explanations. That was exactly what they were waiting for. Instead, I sat at the small desk in my room with Mila beside me, My laptop opened, my phone plugged in, and I started cutting off every possible exit they might try to take later. I saved the screenshot of the listing again, then again somewhere else. Cloud. External drive. Email draft sent to myself and never opened. I wrote down the timestamp, the group name it was shared, and the username that posted it, the time it went live. I wasn't collecting feelings. I was collecting a timeline. Because stories can be argued with. Timelines are harder to kill. I messaged the woman who sent me the screenshot and asked calmly where she'd seen it first. Church group, she said. Posted earlier that afternoon. She hadn't thought much of it until she saw my post about a missing dog and the picture of Mila reading with Pippin curled against her. That detail mattered. It meant this wasn't some private one-off transaction. It had already touched the outside world, which meant it was no longer something they could bury inside this house and pretend never happened. The next step was the hardest one, not because it was complicated, but because it forced me to say the truth out loud to a stranger. I clicked on the number from the listing and stared at it for a long second before dialing. When a woman answered, her voice polite and cautious, I introduced myself and didn't soften anything. I told her my name. I told her Pippin was my dog. I told her his microchip was registered in my name, and that my 11-year-old daughter was sitting next to me trying not to cry because someone in our family had taken him and told her he was dead. There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. She said her name was Nora. She apologized before I even finished my sentence, said she had no idea. Then piece by piece she told me exactly what Everett had told her, that Pippin was his dog, that his son didn't want to take responsibility anymore, that it was a sad situation, but he was doing what was best for the animal. She told me they'd paid $2,500 because Everett described Pippin as trained, calm, good with children, and worth it. She sounded shaken now, embarrassed, angry, scared she'd been pulled into something wrong. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of anything. I told her I believed she didn't know. Then I asked her if she'd be willing to meet me somewhere public that same day and bring everything Everett had given her. Any papers, any messages, anything at all. She agreed immediately. After I hung up, I stared at the wall for a moment, letting the reality of it settle. This wasn't about Brant. It never had been. Brant was just the excuse that made it sound reasonable. The real currency here was control and money. I texted my sister Della and asked her directly if Brant had ever actually been afraid of Pippin. Her reply came back slow and carefully worded the way hers always did when she was dodging something. She said I was blowing things out of proportion. She said I needed to calm down. She said I shouldn't embarrass the family over a misunderstanding. She never answered the question. That was answer enough. Not long after Lorraine appeared in the doorway of my room, her voice suddenly soft, syrupy. She told me to take a breath, said everything could be worked out if I'd just stop escalating things. I asked her one question and one question only. Where was Pippin right now? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked past me at Mila and said my daughter was too sensitive, that I'd raised her to be dramatic. I felt something hot flash behind my eyes, but I noted it and let it pass. This was their pattern. Attack the character, avoid the action, blame the victim so the behavior never has to be named. I went back to my desk and started preparing for the meeting. I printed the microchip confirmation, the vet records, the screenshot of the listing, a photo of the note taped to Mila's door. I loaded the doorbell footage from the neighbor onto a flash drive. I packed everything into a single folder and put it in my backpack. Then I knelt in front of Mila and told her the truth in a way she could handle. She was going to see Pippin again, but until that moment I needed her calm. I needed her safe. She nodded, wiping her eyes, trusting me with something much bigger than fear. A few minutes later, Nora texted again. She said she'd bring the paperwork Everett gave them, some kind of rehoming agreement. She said he'd told them not to contact the family afterward because things were messy. She said they'd paid in a way he suggested so it would be quick and clean. As I read her message, the shape of the whole thing finally came into focus. This wasn't panic, it was preparation. And as the sun dipped lower outside my window, I stopped thinking like a father trying to get his daughter's dog back. I started thinking like someone about to put an entire house on record. I got to the shopping center parking lot early, choosing a spot with a clear view of the security cameras mounted on the light poles. The sky was already starting to soften into that late afternoon gray, the kind that makes everything feel suspended. Mila sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands folded tight in her lap, eyes fixed straight ahead. I reminded her of the one rule I'd set. She could cry when she held Pippin, not before, not until he was safe. Nora and her husband Glenn pulled in a few minutes later, their movements stiff, unsure. I stepped out first, hands visible calm. I told them again that I didn't blame them, that I needed the truth, not a fight. Glenn opened the back of their car, and there he was. Pippin lay on a blanket thinner than I remembered, his cloudy eye blinking as if the world had suddenly gotten brighter. When he lifted his head and saw Mila, everything else disappeared. He stood tail wagging, and the sound that came out of my daughter wasn't a scream or a sob, just a broken little gasp as she dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. Pippin pressed into her like he'd been holding his breath too. I gave them a moment. I let the reunion happen fully because that was the truth of it. Then gently, I pulled myself back into focus. Nora handed me a folder. Inside was everything. A typed rehoming agreement. Printed messages about the price. Confirmation of payment. I took photos of each page, asked Nora to confirm out loud what Everett had said, and recorded her statement with her permission. She repeated it clearly, that Everett claimed ownership, that he said I didn't want the dog anymore, that he told them this was for the good of the family. As I read the agreement more closely, my stomach dropped. There was a line stating that the owner relinquished all rights. The name attached to it wasn't quite right. Close enough to pass at a glance. Wrong enough to matter. I had never signed anything. Neither had Mila. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a constructed lie. Nora apologized again, her voice tight with anger, now not fear. Glenn swore under his breath when he saw the note photo I showed them. They agreed to send a written statement that evening and said they'd cooperate with whatever came next. I thanked them. Then I lifted Pippin into the back seat of my car myself and watched Mila settle beside him, her hand resting on his ribs, her breathing finally matching his. On the drive home, I caught my daughter's reflection in the rearview mirror. She still looked shaken, but something had shifted. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She was present, alive in her body again. I told her quietly that she was allowed to love what she loved, and anyone who tried to take that from her would have to answer for it. She nodded once, pressing her forehead against Pippin's. When we got home, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't announce anything. I fed Pippin, tucked Mila into my bed with him curled at her side, and waited until her breathing slowed into sleep. Only then did I pick up my backpack, check that every piece of evidence was still there, and head back out into the night. I knew exactly what I was doing next. And I knew if I hesitated even once, they would try to erase the truth all over again. Chuang 5. I didn't waste a second after we got back home. I locked every door. Mila slept in my room with Pippin curled at her feet, and I stayed up making copies, screenshots, photos, scanned documents. Everything got uploaded to the cloud, backed up twice. I was done letting them catch me off guard. Before I left, I leaned down beside Mila and whispered, "I'm stepping out for a bit. You don't open this door for anyone but me, not even if they sound calm, not even if they knock soft. You call me. Got it." She nodded, eyes wide and alert despite the late hour. I handed her my backup phone and locked the door from the inside, then quietly slipped out the front and drove to the Naperville Police Department. I didn't come in shouting or demanding justice. I wasn't some emotional wreck. I came like a man filing a report, clean, direct, professional. I laid out the timeline for the officer at the front desk like I was building a case file, because I was. I told them everything. The note they left on Mila's bedroom door. The belongings cleared from her room. Their refusal to tell us where Pippin had been taken. The listing for $2,500. The conversation with the buyer. The exchange where we got Pippin back. The forged paperwork. Then I handed over physical proof. The microchip registered under my name, vet records, screenshots of the ad, the payment details Nora provided, the actual note that read, "We culled your dog, don't make a scene." I told them plainly this wasn't just about a dog. They used that word, killed, to emotionally terrorize an 11-year-old girl. They wanted her to stay quiet. They wanted her to feel small. The officer, Detective Harmon, nodded slowly as he read the note. Then he looked at me and asked the first of several questions. Who is the legal owner of the dog I slid over the microchip registration and the vet bills all with my name? Do you have any witnesses to the transaction I gave him Nora and Glenn's full names, the texts Nora had sent confirming Everett's claims, and a screenshot of the listing showing his phone number? Any evidence of forgery, I showed him the rehoming agreement. The signature wasn't mine. Mila's name was spelled wrong deliberately, I believed, and the phrasing made it sound like I had surrendered the dog, which I never did. He leaned back, tapped the papers with his pen, and said, "You understand this might qualify as fraud or even theft, right?" I nodded. He continued, "If someone sells a dog they don't legally own and accepts money for it with misleading documentation, it's not just a family dispute anymore. It's a misrepresentation of ownership. It's criminal." My jaw clenched. That was all I needed to hear. Back in the car as I drove home, my phone buzzed. A message from Lorraine. "You brought strangers into our house business. Don't think you'll get to keep Mila if you make this ugly." Seconds later, another from Della. "You're blowing this up. Don't drag us down with your need for attention." There it was. The shift. They weren't just trying to take a dog. They were gearing up to take my daughter. They knew they couldn't control me anymore, so they'd go after what mattered most. They'd rewrite the story, paint me as unstable, accuse me of alienating Mila. And I knew their tactics. They'd done it before with other people in this family. I just hadn't thought they'd try it with my own child. When I got home, they were all awake. They weren't worried about me or Mila. They were waiting to see how loud I'd blow. Lorraine, all fake concern, said, "You've embarrassed this whole family." Everett, still trying to act like a patriarch, asked, "You go to the police." I didn't answer either of them with emotion. No accusations, no yelling. Just a single question. "Where's the $2,500? Everett blinked. Lorraine stiffened. What he said. The money. From selling my dog. "Where is it?" He shifted like he hadn't expected that angle. "It's for the house. We've got bills. You think groceries pay for themselves." So it wasn't about Brant being scared. I said, calm as ice. Everett stammered, "Well, it's both. Look, we needed to do what was best." "You lied." I cut in. "You used Brant as a shield and sold a dog that didn't belong to you." I glanced around the kitchen. Unpaid bills stuffed behind magnets. Overdue notices tucked beneath recipe cards. I'd never been told we were struggling, but it explained everything, their desperation, their hostility, when I questioned authority. I was never supposed to find out. "You needed money," I said, mostly to myself, "so you sold something that didn't belong to you. And now you're trying to gaslight your way back into control." Lorraine shifted tactics fast. "Mila's always been too sensitive. You raised her that way. You made her weak." There it was, the narrative they were crafting. It wasn't just about Pippin, it was about conditioning Mila, punishing her for feeling too much, making her believe she was the problem for reacting. That note they taped to her door. It wasn't just cruelty, it was calculated. I locked eyes with Lorraine and said, "You didn't just steal her dog. You tried to teach her that loving anything too much makes her a burden. That's the real damage." They didn't answer. I didn't tell them I'd gone to the police. I didn't tell them what might come next. I let them stay confident in their ignorance. That night I sat on the edge of my bed, watched Mila sleep next to Pippin, and made two decisions. First, I was going to move out. I'd already lost too much to that house. Second, I was going to let them wake up to a knock on the door they wouldn't forget. Morning came too quiet. I got up early and made breakfast in my room, just toast and scrambled eggs on a paper plate. Mila and I sat on the floor beside the bed. Pippin lay between us, calm now, as if he knew he was home again. I checked my phone. Lorraine had sent one last message in the middle of the night. "Don't do anything you'll regret." I'd already done it. I kept Mila in the room. I didn't want her near the front of the house. Pippin stayed close, quiet and still. Even at 11, Mila understood the gravity of what was happening. Around 9 a.m., the knock came. It was the kind of knock you hear in your chest. 3 sharp hits, no hesitation. Everett opened the door. "Who is it?" "Naperville Police Department," came the reply. "We're here regarding a report involving a dog that was allegedly taken and sold without the owner's consent." I stepped into the hallway just as they started listing the facts. The animal was listed online under a phone number registered to Mr. Everett Bell, one officer said. The microchip is registered to his son. We have corroborating statements from the buyers that Mr. Bell claimed ownership and completed a financial transaction in cash. Everett's face drained of color. "They're making this out like I'm a criminal," he muttered. One officer held up a printed copy of the Craigslist post. "Is this your phone number?" He didn't answer. Lorraine rushed in. "This is a private family matter. You people don't belong here." "This is a legal matter," the officer responded calmly. "Ownership of an animal, misrepresentation, and transfer of money without legal authority fall under local fraud statutes." Lorraine changed tactics instantly. "Please, the neighbors, can we not do this here?" Everett stood frozen. The air had shifted. The illusion of control was gone. "I didn't mean anything," he finally said. "I was trying to help." "By lying?" the officer asked. "By forging ownership and taking money." At that point, Lorraine grabbed for the last weapon she thought she had me. "He's mentally unstable. This is what he does. He gets emotional and blames people." But the officer didn't flinch. "We're not here to debate emotions. We're here for the facts. Is the microchip in your name? Did you accept $2,500 in cash?" Della called in at that exact moment. Lorraine put her on speaker. "Tell them," she hissed. Della's voice crackled. "This is all about Brant. He's scared of the dog." I cut in calm as ever. "Did Brant know about the note taped to Mila's door? The one that said, 'We called your dog'? Did he write that?" Silence. "Did he even see it?" I asked again. "Or was he just another excuse?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "Note," I handed him the photo. He read it, lips tightening. "We'll be filing a full report," he said. "We advise you to prepare for follow-up. At minimum, restitution is required. Potential criminal misrepresentation charges are on the table." When Lorraine heard the word record, she cracked. Her whole face fell not from guilt, but from fear. Fear of what people would say, of losing her reputation. Everett tried one last play. "If you hate it here so much, then leave." I looked him dead in the eye. "I will. And Mila comes with me, along with every piece of evidence you so kindly helped create." After the police left, Lorraine exploded. "You tore this family apart over a damn dog." "No," I said. "You tore it apart the moment you decided Mila's feelings were a problem to fix instead of a life to protect." That night I began packing. Not just our things, but everything we'd need to start over. Birth certificates, school records, my job contracts. I called a friend in Plainfield about a rental. We'd be out within a week. Before bed, Mila looked up at me. Was it my fault? I knelt beside her, took her hands, and said, "Never. You never have to apologize for crying. The only people who should be ashamed are the ones who gave you something to cry about." I kissed her forehead and left the door slightly open. They'd already heard one knock. The next one would end this for good. The house felt radioactive after the police left. Every surface, every breath in the air felt like it might detonate. Lorraine slammed a cabinet hard enough to rattle the glass. Everett just stood there, arms crossed, glaring at the door like he wanted to drag the law back in and undo everything they just said. They didn't say sorry. They didn't ask about Mila. They didn't check if the 11-year-old girl they traumatized was eating, sleeping, breathing. No. They came for me instead. "You humiliated this family," Lorraine hissed before I could step out of the hallway. "Do you know what people will think?" I didn't answer. I walked past them and locked my bedroom door. Mila was still asleep, curled up on the far side of the bed, her arms around Pippin like he might disappear again. He lifted his head when he saw me, then laid it back down with a quiet sigh like he knew everything wasn't over yet. I sat down on the floor and started planning. Everett's threat came within the hour. He pounded on the door, barking out, "You don't live here anymore. I want you out today." Then something about changing the locks, about cutting the internet. I didn't even flinch. I wasn't surprised. This was their pattern: hurt, deny, punish. If they couldn't scare me into silence, they'd push me out of the house entirely, and they wanted me gone before I could take Mila or the evidence with me. I switched into another gear. Survival gear. I made a list fast from memory. Birth certificate, school records, medical records, Pippin's microchip and vet receipts, my employment contract, my bank access, screenshots of the dog sale ad, the original note. I uploaded everything to the cloud, duplicated and encrypted files, sent copies to myself to a second account and to Nora with a message that simply said, "If anything happens, this is the story." By midday, I had already identified a short-term rental near Mila's school. I would get us out in 48 hours max. My bag was packed by nightfall. I didn't tell Mila yet. I needed to protect her bubble of safety for a little longer. That's when Lorraine struck again. She slipped a comment under the door like a knife. "You think you're taking her with you? CPS will want to hear about this little crusade of yours." I froze. That wasn't just a threat, it was their play. The note on Mila's door, the way it framed her as emotional and me as unstable, it was all groundwork. They weren't just trying to break me emotionally. They were building a case for custody, or at least to make me look like a danger to Mila if I left with her. So I flipped the script before they could. That evening, I emailed Mila's school counselor with a formal statement. I told them Mila had been the victim of an emotionally traumatizing event involving her support dog. I gave them the fax note on the door dog sold without notice verbal threats toward me when I sought help. I didn't editorialize. I didn't beg for pity. I asked for documentation. I wanted everything recorded: the dates, the emotional impact, the fear Mila experienced. I wanted this in the system before Lorraine or Della could twist it. Then I made an appointment with a child psychologist. I told the receptionist everything. She paused when I described the note. "We killed your dog. Don't make a scene," and I could hear the change in her tone. "We'll prioritize this," she said. "This week." Later that night, as I was gathering the last of our things, I opened a drawer in the shared home office. A printed draft was still in the recycling bin. I pulled it out. It was the note, not the one on Mila's door. A draft, with alternate phrasing, with edits in red pen. And below it, search history still visible on the laptop, were phrases like how much to charge for rehoming assistant's dog price and writing tough love letters to children. Della's name was logged into the laptop. This wasn't a moment of panic. This wasn't a mistake. They planned every word to maximize pain. They designed that note to look like Mila's emotions were the problem, so if she cried or panicked or lashed out, they could say, "See, she overreacts. He can't manage her. We were right." I confronted them one last time. Mila stayed in the room with Pippin door locked. I stood in the kitchen facing Lorraine and Everett alone. "Who wrote the note?" I asked calmly. They didn't answer. "Where's the $2,500?" Everett looked away. "If this was about Brant being afraid, why did you use a platform for selling dogs and draw up a written agreement?" They started yelling. Everett called me ungrateful. Lorraine said I was tearing the family apart. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You tore it apart the moment you told a little girl her feelings didn't matter. Then I made my decision. We're leaving. Mila and I. Tomorrow. And any contact with her goes through me. You call CPS, you call the school, you try to lie, we'll add that to the report. They didn't respond. Lorraine looked like she wanted to throw something. Everett finally turned his back, the coward's version of surrender. I didn't care. The moment I closed the door to our room, I breathed again. I looked at Mila, sleeping next to Pippin, and whispered, "You don't have to be quiet anymore. I'm here." We weren't done fighting, but for the first time we were no longer outnumbered. We left before sunrise. No dramatic goodbye. No shouting in the driveway. Just quiet footsteps, a soft zip of the suitcase, and the careful lift of Mila's backpack over her shoulder, while she cradled Pippin in the crook of her arm. He was heavier than she remembered, but she carried him like it was her turn to protect him now. The short-term rental wasn't much: 2 rooms, a kitchenette, a creaky pull-out couch, but it was ours. It was clean. It was safe. It was free from notes taped to doors and fake smiles with knives behind them. First thing I did was notify Mila's school new contact address, new guardianship arrangements. I updated her emergency contacts, removed every name that shared DNA with her, left mine and mine alone. Then I closed the loop with the police. I submitted every document I'd collected, the screenshots, the microchip registration, the note, both the original and the draft I'd found. Nora and Glenn, the buyers, sent in their own report, complete with screenshots of Everett's messages, claiming he was the owner and asking for electronic payment. They attached their own invoice. It was airtight. The officer I spoke to confirmed what I suspected. "This won't be swept under the rug," he said. "It's being forwarded to the DA's office for review." I didn't ask what would happen to Everett. I didn't care about his record or his reputation. I cared about the truth sitting on file somewhere unerasable. I cared that if he ever tried to touch Mila's life again through a courtroom door, this would be waiting for him on the other side. And then, it spread. It started small. A look from a neighbor across the street. A comment from someone at church who'd seen the Facebook listing. Then someone posted a link in the neighborhood group, $2,500 rehoming fee for registered assistance dog, and the comments exploded. Everett couldn't hide it. Not anymore. People talked. They always do. About how I had the paperwork. About how Mila was crying at school the day after the dog disappeared. About how Glenn and Nora had to bring Pippin back because they were sold a lie. And then came the final attempt at damage control. Lorraine called me. She started soft. I was just trying to do what was best. Families make mistakes. Then she pivoted. "Maybe we can make this go away. Everett's willing to refund the money if you agree to." I hung up. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need a refund. I didn't need an excuse. What I needed was the one thing they never gave me: boundaries. So I gave them mine. All future contact regarding Mila must go through my attorney. I won't speak with you directly. I will not return. And Mila will not return. We are not your story anymore. Then I blocked every number. Months passed. When I look back on that note, I don't remember the ink as much as the silence it tried to force on an 11-year-old. And I think that's what this story really was: someone deciding a kid's grief was inconvenient and a parent deciding it wouldn't be swallowed anymore. We don't have to turn people into monsters to learn something here. Sometimes the most human thing we can do is protect what's tender, even when it makes the room uncomfortable. If any part of this hit close to home, you're not alone. If you feel like it, drop a few words in the comments, just hi, where you're watching from, or what you would have done in my shoes. I read more than you think. And sometimes a small connection is the difference between carrying it all and sharing the weight. And if you want a place for stories like this, messy, honest, and still hopeful, subscribe and stay with us. Not for drama, for the reminder that we can choose kindness, boundaries, and courage in the same breath. All right, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.